Welcome to a session that is going to completely change the way that you look at building neuro-inclusive workplaces. Today we have Tania at PegSquared, myself, Ruth-Ellen individuals. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of today. This is the agenda. Few intros we're going to be doing in a second when it comes to neuro-inclusion. We're going to talk about some misconceptions. We're also going to talk about some hiring practices, potential strategies, and actionable steps for organizations. I'm going to introduce myself slightly. I'm a Chief Innovation Officer here, so I help support the team and everyone in the organization to innovate in a way that's going to help to leverage the way that neurodivergent and the neurodiversity space is really action for the world. Tania Martin, please introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you so much for having me on today. I am a neurodiversity consultant, predominantly working with organizations to help educate but also action neurodiversity in the workplace. My background is I spent 20 years in corporate. I was actually the person responsible for the people process when setting up EY's Neurodiverse Centre of Excellence. I lived and breathed building a neurodivergent team within a large organisation, the challenges that bring, everything from how we recruit all the way through to promotion and progression. It was an incredibly interesting space to sit in terms of learning about neurodiversity. I had the most amazing privileged role, basically 100% of my time was on neurodiversity in the workplace within a large organisation. I felt incredibly lucky to have had that opportunity. Prior to that, I led big teams. I spent most of my time doing transformation, people and technology projects within large organisations, but started in recruitment. I had a bit of a squiggly career, as we like to call it. I also was diagnosed myself with ADHD back in 2022. So lived experience as well as the great professional experience I have had.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today, Tania. All of us here in this space, maybe we are neurodivergent ourselves. I'm neurodivergent too, dyslexic, dyspraxic, ADHD, and autism, as well as OCD. We want to know what's going to make this session for you as impactful as possible. When you hear neuro-inclusive workplace, what's the first challenge that comes to mind? This is a psychologically safe space, so make sure that you are very real and very transparent about what that means for you. Okay, so far we have the first challenge being reasonable adjustments, misunderstanding and barriers. Anything else that comes to mind? We've got equity is a challenge, organization, compassion, safety, consistency, reassurance. We got stuff around hybrid working, unlikely to be that good. That's the one that we can relate to. We've got double empathy problems. We've got things around neuro-washing. It's a new term I've not heard, but I like it. And I want you to explain a bit more about that. We've also got pieces around adaptability. We've got discrimination. We have time for open conversation. Which is an important piece, right? Is it inclusive to all? That's a good question. It's a good challenge as well that comes up. Unwritten rules. Yes, when they're not explicit, you've got ambiguity that comes up, right? No one wants that. But trust, that's a challenge as well. Exclusion. Oh, I love these. These are challenges that are exactly why we need to move beyond awareness to action, right? When building a neuro-inclusive workplace, which is typically the biggest initial challenge. So I've asked you for the challenge full stop. Now I want to know the biggest initial challenge. This is really great info because this is also educating people, organizations around the frustrations, right? Let's share that. So far, we have changing existing culture and mindsets as the first initial biggest challenge. Looks like that is the top one. Then getting leadership buy-in second and understanding, and then knowing where to start, basically, and setting measurable goals and outcomes as well. The majority of us are in agreement around the order. Tania, before we move on to the next slide, is this what you're also encountering in your space?
Yeah. Do you want me to elaborate on why?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
Absolutely. It is a challenge to get people to even have the neurodiversity conversation. Let's be really honest about this. I was doing some research yesterday and there was a really interesting statistic that jumped out at me. 51% of leaders, senior manager and above, are Generation X. So my generation, our generation, neurodiversity was not something that was positive. It was incredibly negative. It was something we would hide, we would mask, we didn't want to talk about. It was an area that wasn't a positive experience for us. It was really interesting seeing everybody's responses to begin with, because they were incredibly negative in terms of how you believe neuro-inclusion in the workplace is at the moment. I get that. But let's think about that. 51% of our leaders see neurodiversity as something that is a deficit as opposed to a difference, which is what the new generations that are coming through see it as. We already have a huge hurdle that we have to overcome. What's really interesting is that those that are doing something in this space, those leaders that are embracing neuro-inclusion, and we're doing it in pockets, we're not doing it across an organization, they tend to be led by a person who has lived experience themselves or has a personal connection to neurodiversity. What we're finding is people want to leave a legacy behind, and leaders in roles who suddenly go, right, actually, I want my children to work in an environment where it is neuro-inclusive. Those are the leaders that are trying to make the difference. But the challenge we have is exactly right. It's about re-educating. It is about getting people to engage with this topic that actually naturally they feel incredibly uncomfortable with.
Fantastic. I've been sharing the comments and everyone is in agreement around the piece, right? Piece around culture and mindset being such an important piece. I totally agree around the subset of culture and mindset, Stephen, as well. Without buy-in, without somebody driving change in who's in power to be able to actually implement, it's very challenging to make those changes. Thank you, Tania. True or false? We know the answer to this, but we just want to make it super clear. Once you've done your diversity awareness training, you've built an inclusive workplace. We want it to be very clear. We have 14 false. I want this. Once you've done neurodiversity awareness training, you've built an inclusive workplace. True or false? False, absolutely. There is this piece around understood by government as well. 31 false. It is false. Once you've done neurodiversity awareness training, you've done neurodiversity awareness training. That's it. You've just done it. There's no clear measurement of actually change in culture. There's no clear measurement of change in outcomes and impact. An inclusive workplace actually has to be from end to end. And it's an ongoing piece. Even if you do training once a year, 3 times a year, 7 times a year, 20 times a year, that doesn't mean that you've got an inclusive workplace. Right? These leadership buy-in challenges by difficulty in your experience. I know it might sound like it's a repetitive question, but I wanted you to do it in a level of ratings because we want to see where you're at as well. You get triggered for calling out negative behaviors that demonstrate the negative behaviors are allowed to slide. Yeah. We need to have consequences as well for behaviors too. Charlie says, I found that even when there is leadership buy-in, there is still a lack of understanding and willingness to invest strategically and spend time and effort in it and not leave it up to ND to drive the change. The emotional labor that we as neurodivergent individuals have to take on, then we've got, I find that especially in social work management, is dire despite me self-diagnosed. I feel that I'm very frustrated. We feel your frustration through the screen, Helen. We are there with you. Then I'm just going to go through this one. It's going to text the bit on the screen. The real life impact of living whilst being new and spicy isn't understood, and I find a lot is because they can't see our struggles. I share my lived experience a lot and have found it helps people understand better. However, the amount of managers I come across that simply don't want to learn is shocking. I just Googled neuro-washing. I come across the word before. Neurodiversity training is neuro-washing most of the time. Getting initial leadership attention, sustaining a long-term commitment, moving from awareness to budget allocation. It's a good one. And then getting middle management on board and measuring and proving return on investment is actually lost. Just quickly, Tania, would you be able to share about these challenges as well? Just maybe around one thing that people can do to get initial leadership attention, just one thing.
The one thing that they should be focused on is the business reasons as to why this is important, because the challenge we've got with neurodiversity is it tends to fall into the HR compliance bucket. Actually, there's some genuine business reasons as to why a neurodiverse workforce is good for the bottom line. So everything from innovation and creativity. If you have a diverse team, you get better ideas, better results. There's data that relates to that and backs that up. Productivity statistics exist around neurodiversity and having diverse teams. Retention statistics, if you get this right, retention goes up. Talent attraction as well. People join organizations if there's a focus on neurodiversity because it says something about the culture of that organization. Focus on the why, as opposed to it being a negative, we need help. Let's change the narrative to a, this is actually good for business if we focus on this.
Fantastic, thank you. That data, that why behind the piece, going back to the business outcomes. Let's talk about barriers. I know there's quite a few here. It's not a comprehensive list. We can only fit so many here. But I want to know, which hiring practices do you think create the biggest barriers for neurodivergent candidates? Studies that show a neurospicy colleague who is in a supportive environment will be at least 30% more productive. The amount of places saying they're struggling to recruit or retain, ensure supportive and inclusive environments and use our strengths. Thank you. We've also got Helen, who says it's so clear as day to me that benefits has been, again, social care. It's nice to staff with a revolving door, but we could retain staff only focus on inclusion. Thank you. Helen, when it comes to biggest barriers for neurodivergent candidates, we've got traditional interview formats, panels, high pressure, job descriptions with unnecessary requirements, lack of alternative assessment methods, unconscious bias in screening, and unclear application processes. All of the above are problematic. So if you are a hiring manager, you work in HR, and you are doing any of these, 26 people are saying all of these are problematic. I'm going to guess this part is 50-50 to an extent for some. I know initially it might be 50-50, but actually long-term, sustainable wise, in terms of sustainable income for neurodivergent individuals, attaining, in my experience, is harder because that is where the work comes in. I'm going to ask Tania a question around this one. When it comes to attraction, evaluative retention, obviously we've seen a lot of retention piece. What's your experience with helping clients think about the whole hiring journey rather than just the recruitment piece?
I think the challenge organizations have is that the employee life cycle as a whole isn't owned by a single person. What you're having to do is there are so many different touch points across that employee life cycle. I think this is where the work that I did in the Neurodiversity Centre of Excellence was really interesting, because I did manage the whole process. So end to end, I was having to think about how our current processes within EY were impacting my neurodivergent team and what changes we needed to make, if we need to make any at all. What was really interesting was we then provided that feedback to those teams in terms of saying, this doesn't work from a neuro-inclusive perspective. It is incredibly hard to drive neuro-inclusivity across the employee lifecycle if you are not picking up each individual team in order to do that. The one thing that does bridge both recruitment and retention is this concept of psychological safety. You can start building that from day one. You can start building that from the day that a person looks at your website and goes, do you know what? I can see that they have people who are neurodivergent and they are thriving in this organization. You can prove that throughout the recruitment process. You don't forget about it when you've offered them the job, because ultimately it's that period of time where there's a lot of anxiety before they start, where you need to continue building that psychological safety. And then once they get into a team, that relationship with their line manager is incredibly important. I think that underpins it, and creating that is incredibly essential for an organization to do. In terms of how you do it end to end, you've got to get those that are responsible for parts of the process engaged in neurodiversity and understanding it from the neurodivergent individual's perspective, as opposed to them just putting their own spin on it.
Include us, nothing without us. Piece around the employee life cycle as well, and having everybody involved in it, not just, okay, hiring managers have the other part and then we won't involve you in the rest of the infrastructure. I think you're doing a disservice to the whole process, and you're losing a lot of money as well when you talk about businesses, because you're not ordering the life cycle. You're looking at the awareness, you're not looking at the acceptance piece, and you're not looking at the advancements piece. That's a challenge, right? Tick box in organizations look attractive, and reality it's just going to tick box once it's been completed, it isn't reflected on. there's a piece there as well, right? Sometimes when there's not that full understanding in a cycle, it can cause those challenges. Thank you for the piece around giving us your insights around what is harder. Obviously, every organization is different. So attracting might be harder for some, training is harder for others, but honoring that retention can be the challenge mostly. This is around which approach creates more sustainable neuro-inclusion. Obviously, tongue in cheek here with some of these questions. Focus on quick, visible wins first, implement comprehensive systematic change. Start with policy changes, and then culture, then begin with individual accommodations. What's your insights? What's your take? Is there a right answer? Is it a combination? Is it just one? What's going to help around masking? Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that. When you don't address the elements of psychological safety and you have that in place on an ongoing basis, the masking is going to be the byproduct of that. Without that being addressed, anxiety and depression will come into play as well. We are going to go into the response here around systematic change being a top thing first. Then policy changes and then culture is second. Individual accommodations is third. And quick, visible wins, surprise, surprise, isn't the things that people think are going to create sustainable. So the question is around sustainable neuro-inclusion. So long-term piece.
What's really interesting about that answer is that actually most organizations begin with individual accommodations and very few are doing systematic change.
Yeah, I know it's part of the policy. I'm going to adhere to this piece. If you had to organize neuro-inclusion transformation into key areas, which would be the most crucial? Awareness, effectiveness, and advancement. We've got the understanding environment opportunity piece. We have training policies, accommodation, recruitment, retention, and the leadership culture. Which level is typically hardest to embed neuro-inclusion into? Senior, middle management, team level, day-to-day, or interconnected? Good point, Vicky. Thank you for sharing. I believe that individual accommodations are still quite key, but again, there's that piece around where does it fit, how do you prioritize this? Workplace needs assessments are really helpful and powerful. We'll go beyond acceptance, actually appreciating neurodivergence as well. Which type of real-world example will be most valuable for you today? It's going to be around small organizations, large enterprises, hiring-specific process overhaul, cultural change initiatives, case studies, or quick wins and immediate implementation stories. Which one's going to be the most helpful? Cultural change initiatives, case studies. And yeah, get ready for that because that seems to be the most popular piece for today. We all know our neuro-inclusion efforts are working when we can measure, write it in a sentence, the success of our neurodivergent clients. Employee reporting sense of belonging. I love belonging. I love accessibility as well. That piece definitely needs to be measured as well. And the employee's retention satisfaction levels. Love that. How many staff have left and set the timeframes on what's sent in supervision? Positive employee satisfaction in this area. Satisfaction. Reduce distress amongst ND staff. Employee satisfaction. Psychological safety of all employees. You need to constantly ask for help, support, standards, celebration of diversity and thought. Well-being across all staff for psychological safety, changes of all levels, safe staff capacity to handle the job we signed up to, personal examples, productivity of neurodiverse employees, psychological safety from an intersectional lens as well, right? One person's psychological safety will look different to somebody else's. That measurement is key. We have retention as well as a measure. Not feeling like you're always having to advocate for yourself, feeling comfortable being yourself. So it's truly showing up. Less spikes in rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria, huge topic in any of the colleagues as well. Improve productivity for all. Really great work, everyone. Thank you also for sharing. Growth opportunities, cultural change in organization, all people being able to be themselves at work and not feeling burnt out in a role in a few years. Yes. We got retention again. Okay, we have many things. Amazing. The awareness, safety, and satisfaction and the individuals and maybe the organization begins to look at other areas that be systematically wrong from the beginning. I completely agree. There is so much to unpack. We could be here for months. You can watch a plethora of previous sessions that we have done on our YouTube. We have quite a few subscribers, but if you're not subscribed already, subscribe. It's going to be helpful for you. Random questions, Tania, which we will get to before we get to the Q&A, I know you might answer some of these in the Q&A, so feel free to expand, but feel free to pick maybe 2 or 3 you can answer. April has shared our YouTube channel as well. Thank you for doing that. We are going to be asking Tania to come back as well in a future session. Okay, over to you, Tania. Which ones are you choosing?
There's so many. I just want to pick up on the boredom burnout that somebody just mentioned. This is absolutely a thing. And I don't think people who are not neurodivergent, who don't experience this, realize just how incredibly challenging it is. One of the things we implemented within my team was a boredom bucket. Okay. What we did is in that boredom bucket, we had lists of activities that you could pick up and put down again. When you were in a period of downtime, you were able to go into the boredom bucket and pick something out of it and go, I'm just going to work on this for a day or a week or a few hours. And then you could put it back into the boredom bucket and come back to it. But you absolutely 100%. I've worked with a team where that has been a thing. And it's incredibly challenging. Why is it so difficult to be done? We are having to re-educate. Neurodiversity is really interesting in the DEI space because it is unlike any other DEI pillar. If we say we're going to focus on women, what we're doing is we're going out, we're attracting more women, we're making them come into the workforce, we're hoping to promote them, to progress them, etc. When you are talking about neurodiversity, you're talking about the brain. What you're not just saying is how do we attract and retain people who are neurodivergent? We're having to say, how do we attract them, retain them, and set the environment up so that it works for their style of processing information, for their style of communicating. It's an incredibly different conundrum. And there is so much co-occurrence between different neurodivergent conditions. We can't take this blanket approach in terms of, we want to hire 5 people with ADHD. We're going to give them all of these adjustments because that's what people with ADHD need. We have to treat everybody as an individual. One thing I will say, there was a question around reasonable adjustments. I get asked a lot at the moment around self-advocacy. And the reason why I've been asked that question by organizations is because the speed at which it takes to change an organization is not quick. Make a list, have a piece of paper on your desk. Every time you're doing a task, just put it into one of those columns and you'll really see the things that you actually love to do. Then in that can do column, start to think about, actually, I'm struggling with that. Why am I struggling with that? What might help? We've got to remember with reasonable adjustments is that a lot of things that help people who are neurodivergent are actually ways of working. There's technologies that can help. We can think about desk space, we can think about sensory challenges, and we can think about flexible working. But a lot of the challenges people who are neurodivergent have are actually around, okay, I've just left a meeting, I haven't had the actions, and nobody's going to send those to me. I need them. What can you do in order to ensure you actually start to get those actions? That was 2. There was a cultural change case study piece I just wrote down here that I'm more than happy to share a little bit about what happened at EY because they actually did this really well. And I don't think they did it really well on purpose, which was interesting. When the Neurodiversity Centre of Excellence was announced, it was incredibly visible internally and externally. We were talking about what we were doing. It was all over LinkedIn. It was in the press. Internally, there's a huge amount of PR, I guess, around the subject of what we were doing. With that came great responsibility as well, having to talk about it and be the face of that to some degree. What we did is, we had senior sponsorship. So we had incredibly senior sponsorship from somebody who sat top level of the organization who was behind what we were doing. We were really clear on why we were doing it. It was not only the right thing to be doing, but we also saw the business benefits to doing it. It wasn't just the social reasons, it was bigger than that. We got really clear on our language. When we talked about neurodiversity at EY, neurodivergent, neurotypical, the narrative around that, the strength-based narrative as opposed to a deficit-based narrative, we're really clear on what it was and the why we were doing it. And then what we did is we went out and we spoke to anybody that would listen. We are in team meetings, community events, with our clients, conferences, wherever we could talk about it, we talked about it. What that did was the awareness levels around neurodiversity went up really quickly. Our community grew really quickly. Our community went from 150 people to 2,000 people in 2 years. And that was simply because there was a focus on what we were doing and we were talking about it, and people started to get interested and people started to put their hands up and say, actually, we're here already. We need some support. Our community therefore provided that support for them. I think that just shows that evolution from having never spoken about neurodiversity to suddenly having this organization where neurodiversity was a topic of conversation. And as a result, change could happen from there. They're not perfect. They've still not got it right. They'll say that themselves, but at least they're on their way. EY is one of the big four. PwC, EY, KPMG, and Deloitte are the big four. I don't work there anymore. But when I did, there was about 20,000 people in the UK work for EY.
So yeah, just for the shorthand. Thank you so much, Tania. We're going to get into the Q&A, and there's been so many great questions in here. The team at Exceptional Individuals will go back and answer these questions, especially about reasonable adjustments, because we actually help support people. We deliver coaching, we deliver workplace training, we recommend tech, and we even do co-coaching as well and other solutions. We will come back to some of those that have questions that are around those and any other things that we can definitely answer around the impact we've done in the sort of last 10 years as an organization. But let's get into the Q&A piece. I might go back to some of these questions again, to be fair, because they are really great questions, just to expand on them. But building on those practical pieces around, like you mentioned, the why, the strengths-based narrative, and speaking to anyone that would listen. When you think about the organizations doing digital transformation, they seem to sell us neuro-inclusion too, because system thinking, personalization at scale. Are we missing an opportunity to integrate transformational work streams like technology when it comes to neuro-inclusion?
When I saw this question, it made me smile, because there was a piece of research done at the start of last year around technology specifically. And the number of people, we say 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent. That's the estimate, 1 in 5 to 1 in 7. But the amount of people that came back in the tech space that were neurodivergent was over 50%. Tick the box for neurodiversity. What's really interesting is the technology space, they do this really well. It was the SAPs, it was the Microsoft, it was those organizations that are really leading the way in terms of neuro-inclusion. There's a reason for that. It's because a lot of them are neurodivergent. So it's a lot easier if you are neurodivergent yourself and you understand some of the challenges. Also, if you think about in the tech space, the skills that they need, you need those that are good at solving problems and innovation and creativity and everything else. And then you need those that are in the detail. So it naturally aligns to neurodivergent spiky profiles as well. The integration opportunities. I actually think there's a lot we can learn from tech. Other organizations can learn from tech in terms of what they've done and how they've done it. I know some of that information is out there already. I think there's a reason why they're good at it, and it's because they have large neurodivergent teams.
Amazing. Tech-wise, definitely feel like the AI has transformed the way that I work. I know that the group that we support seen a big shift in that. Before we answer some final questions, we're seeing lots of organizations starting to influence their entire supply chains around neuro-inclusion practices, requiring suppliers to demonstrate cognitive diversity as well. Do you see this becoming a broader requirement, and how might that shift our approach to implementation as well?
I think it's a really interesting question. Let's think about this in terms of recruitment supply chains, okay? An organization can focus on their recruitment process. They can make it as inclusive as possible. But what happens if the suppliers to the organization aren't embedding the same neuro-inclusive practices? It's like I've dealt with, spoken to a number of recruitment agencies or consultancies, and they are saying we've got more candidates actually putting, I have ADHD on my CV, but how are they actually being treated as a result of putting that on their CV? How are the recruitment consultancies using them? So I think there is definitely a question mark for organizations to start thinking about, right, if I am embedding neuro-inclusion, if I am taking this seriously as an organization, how do we ensure that the suppliers that we are using are as serious about neuro-inclusion as we are? I would say we're probably quite a long way off from what I've seen. But I have spoken to organizations that are asking those questions. I just think sometimes they find it very difficult to know where to start.
There's lots of work that definitely to be done. Just to get your insights, audience, tell us how confident you feel about implementing your inclusive practices in your own workplace. Because this is one of the reasons why PegSquared and exceptional individuals exist, right? We're here to support, but we want to know how confident you are. Just from hearing today's session, and we can see where you are at. We talked about already the end-to-end process needed from attraction all the way up to advancement in people's careers and that talent pipeline. You can implement some practices, but we need a whole collaborative approach as well. What's one action you're going to commit to taking back to your organization? Assess your current state honestly, move beyond awareness training to practical implementation. Start measuring your inclusion outcomes, create a systematic transformation plan, or connect with experts, myself and Tania, and EI as an example. Which one are you going to be doing? One action, just one. What are you going to be doing next? Connecting with exceptional individuals, connecting with PegSquared, getting coaching, training, workplace needs assessments. We've delivered over millions of pounds worth of access to work support and also helped people get funding. Then last but not least, we want to make sure we are really focusing on your inclusion topics that matter. Put in your rank of what you want to see next. What should we be building next for you all? Thank you for ranking your interest in next level neuro inclusion. So far, we have comprehensive transformation frameworks. I love that. It's one of my favorite topics. Creating sustainable organizational change, advanced implementation strategies, leadership, development, around neuro inclusion, and return investment measurements as well. Okay, great. Tania, was there any other questions that you could possibly answer, please, before you head off that might help the audience as well?
I'm going to say one last thing. If you are in an organization and you have the ability to sway this in any way possible, please start collecting neurodiversity data. We can't measure ROI without it. All of those topics that came up, we want to see, are people who are neurodivergent happy in the workforce? If we haven't got the data, we can't measure it. Organizations don't do it well. But more importantly, with AI using data to start making HR decisions, if we're not capturing neurodiversity data, we are going to stay hidden. That would be my final point and my soapbox that I will now get off about data.
Data is an important piece. It helps to make informed decisions for the CEOs and the leaders in the organization. Okay. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tania. Can everyone say thanks to Tania? Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for your insights and your invaluable experience and expertise. Again, connect with Tania via LinkedIn. We are going to invite PegSquared to come back as well at a later date. We appreciate you all. Thank you for being here. Thank yourself. Appreciate you all. Shout out PegSquared, shout out exceptional individuals and all the team as well. And we will see you next time. Thanks all again.